Hello, hello, welcome back, everybody. Sorry. No worries. Welcome to the session, Scaling Up Food System Innovation. My name is Darío Soto, and I have the very difficult task to keep the energy up following this morning's incredible presentation. Again, a round of applause to all the presenters from this morning, please. And I wonder if all of us presenters will have to do some show or something after Andrew's presentation from the Bezos Fund. But anyway, growing up in the 80s, I got used to see the future of food represented in shows like The Jetsons or movies like Back to the Future. In The Jetsons, they will show the future of food as small pills that you would eat and you get full and they will taste like meat. In Back to the Future, you will see Marty McFly coming back home and putting a small pizza in the microwave, and suddenly it would go huge and the whole family could eat. To prove us how wrong those visions for the future were, and not only wrong, unhealthy, I have the honor to present Paul Winters, who's going to talk to us. And Paul, give me a second because I'm going to mention the name of the presentation. First of all, Paul is the Executive Director of the Innovation Commission for Climate Change, Food, and Agriculture. And he's going to talk to us about this very interesting topic, again, proving wrong the Jetsons, hopefully. The quest for meta-innovations, breaking the scaling barrier for food system transformation. So, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks. Just waiting for my presentation to come up. But so this morning we heard a lot about different kinds of innovations. And one of the things that you find working in this space is that there are a lot of exciting innovations. And some of the ones that we talked about this morning are very forward-looking, 20, 30 years. But there's some, including some of the ones to mention this morning, that are actually fairly close to ready to go. And the frustrating thing is they're getting to 10,000 farmers or 20,000 farmers or 30,000 farmers here and there, but they're not getting to the hundreds of millions of farmers. So how do we go from that? And how do organizations, I used to work at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, how do we get those organizations to not just do projects of those 50,000 farmers, but to get it to millions of farmers? So what I want to talk to you today about, and it's work of the Commission, but also COP28, which we're working with closely. They have an innovation pillar. You saw Chris here earlier. One of the pillars is on innovation, and we're helping lead on that pillar. And so we're going to take some of those ideas to the COP and hopefully make some announcements around those at the COP. So the main argument we want to make is that taking innovations to scale isn't trivial, right? It's a little complicated. So we heard a lot today about basic science, right? So all these great ideas about green hydrogen and microbial fertilizers and plants that can grow better in the shade. All of these great ideas. And I've spent the last 2 years setting up this commission, talking to all these scientists with these fantastic ideas. And they are very promising. And one of the places we started at was with that Clim-Eat dashboard that we just saw, with their innovation list. So we have all this basic science that occurs. Then going from there, we take them to the field. So we try them out. We pilot them. We do what's called A/B testing. How do you get them into farmers' hands? What is the best means by which to do that? Then we hopefully get them to some sort of scale. But as I said, the problem is ultimately that we just have a small amount of farmers. And what we really want is to get this to tens of millions, hundreds of millions of farmers. And so to do this, we have to think about what leads to scaling. So if you look at the history of thinking about diffusion of innovations, this is back from the early 60s. This idea that if you have something like an iPhone, how does that get to millions of our pockets? It starts with early adopters, people that love new technology, that wait outside in lines outside of the Apple store in the hope of getting that. Then there's the people that kind of come a little bit later, and they start adopting. And then we have this steep curve where lots of people are adopting until we kind of reach saturation in the market and lots of us have iPhones. The problem that we have with that is that that works when there's good commercial incentives. So when the private sector has an incentive to make a lot of money, they go market it, and then we all buy into Apple, and then we buy all their products. A lot of times this doesn't happen though, and you get this failure to diffuse. So you end up stuck down here with good ideas like green hydrogen or microbial fertilizers, and they never reach millions of people. Or you see this happening, but it's just taking too long. We have possibilities of mitigation, but they're not happening. Can we really wait 30, 40 years for them to get to scale? Can we shift this curve over, this S-curve, and make it go faster? Or they're not reaching critical mass. So again, that microbial fertilizer example, it's being used in Iowa. It's being used in Brazil. It's being experimented with in Kenya. But it's maize in Iowa, soybeans in Brazil, and maize in Kenya. What about the other crops? What about the other parts of the world? We also we're not reaching it geographically, the amounts we want, but we're also not reaching all the types of farmers we want. So you go to Brazil, and yes, they're using it at a fairly large scale, but it's all large-scale producers. We're not getting it to the millions of small-scale producers in Brazil. So we might want to shift that curve up. So what we ultimately want to do is change that trajectory. So we have come up with things. So you saw some lists earlier and some discussion earlier. We've come up, this is a slightly different list for two reasons. One is we're looking also at adaptation, where the focus this morning was a little more on mitigation. And the second is we're looking for things that are already ready to scale, where a lot of those ideas still have a little ways to go. So the first is improved weather forecasts. So I have 7 of these, most around adaptation. There's been a randomized control trial in India that shows that if you provide better weather information to farmers just on the monsoon, you'll see a 17% increase in yields. Why? Because they shift the timing of farming. If you take that and you calculate and were to give all the farmers good information just on the monsoon, it'd be worth $3 billion to Indian farming in 5 years. Why isn't it going to scale? Well, one, it's a global public good, right? Weather information isn't usually done by the private sector. It's done by organizations like NOAA here in the US. And there's 10 large national weather services around the world. So how do we get the better weather information? That's one issue. So again, a global public good. The second is how do we make sure that we're getting to getting the information? So digital agriculture, another area, 22% increase in recommended inputs. Climate resilience, social protection. I'm going through these quickly because I'm already going too long. Training for rainwater harvesting. Microbial fertilizers, those that voted for this earlier, you were correct, at least according to us economists. It has a very high return, and I'm skipping some of these numbers, but you see the benefits 10 times. For every dollar you get $10 benefit. For every dollar you get $9. Alternative proteins and reducing methane emissions, which is also one of the areas we talked a lot about. So we have these things that are ready to go. Why don't they go to scale? Well, one of the problems that Danush talked about earlier is we tend to use push mechanisms. That is, we tend to hand money out to pick winners for research. Now, if your job is to hand out the money, as my job was at IFAD for part of it, we did grants. I didn't want to do something stupid, right? My board will come and give me a hard time. You take zero risk. You're going for sure things. And that's very limiting for the arguments already gone. There are other ways of doing this. There's the Development Innovation Ventures at USAID. They use a portfolio approach. People apply for funding at early stage, mid stage, scaling stage. And what they've found when you do that, a lot of them don't go to scale, but a bunch do. And the return that you get in these kind of push mechanisms is so high, 16 million, you're getting a return of roughly 14 times in social benefits, not because everything worked, but because some of them worked incredibly well. So you build in failure into a portfolio by asking for competitive research grants to take things to scale. Then there's also these pull mechanisms. Can we focus on the outcomes? And I want to talk about 3 of these. The first is advanced market commitments. This has been done with vaccines where $1 billion was put out there for a pneumococcal vaccine. In that vaccine, 3 companies said, okay, we'll take the $1 billion. They came up with the vaccine, and then it was put out in the market with a guaranteed price. The shift there is when you use advanced market commitment versus when you don't, you make things go faster. Similarly, you have results-based financing and prizes that can be used. These all basically pay people for outcomes. You're not picking the winners. Some people try and fail, some people succeed, and they win. So again, this idea of failure. So we are not doing this properly, and the question becomes, do we need some sort of other institutional device to come up with the means by which to use these meta innovations? So with that, I'll stop. We have this commission. We're working with COP as well as universities and different centers to focus on these areas, trying to push this idea of let's think of different ways to take things to scale in this particular space. Thanks.
I would like to invite our panelists in front. The names are James Adams, Senior Advisor and U.S. Aim for Clim-Eat USDA. Jamie, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. My name works. Katarina Stenhol, hope that pronounced well. Chief Sustainability Officer, DSM. And Tanya Strauss, from the head of the Food and Water, the World Economic Forum WEF. So welcome to all of you. It's great to be in an all-female panel, and excellent to you guys are taking the lead on this. So we have a round of questions here for all of you, and I hope that beyond the questions, we can engage in a dialogue for the benefit of the audience. So I'll start with you, Jamie. Could you please provide an example of a successful partnership in which USDA engaged, where the funding played a pivotal role in scaling up transformational food system innovation? And what works, what didn't, what experience do you get from it?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's good to see everyone, and it's good to be here with this all-female panel. Thanks so much for having me. Again, my name is Jamie Adams. I'm in the Office of the Chief Scientist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the United States lead on the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle on this question. Instead of identifying one particular project, of which at USDA we have thousands of projects partnering with people from all over the world, and use this as an opportunity to talk about how we've invested in AIM for Climate, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. It's a partnership that we launched at COP26 in co-leadership with the United Arab Emirates. And it boasts over 500 partners from around the world now, including 53 governments. And it's a flagship initiative of the United Arab Emirates going into their COP28 presidency. It's been a huge investment for us at USDA, both in the contributions of staff and other financial resource investments, working with many of your organizations, including Clim-Eat and the Innovation Commission that you just heard about. And so it's been a huge opportunity to bring partners from around the world together towards a common goal. And I'll just close by saying that yesterday we had a fantastic event with Secretary Vilsack and Her Excellency Mariam Al-Mahari, the Minister for Climate Change and Environment of the United Arab Emirates, at the Foreign Policy Food Plus UNGA event yesterday, where they really lifted up AIM for Climate and said that going into COP28, food and agriculture is now at the, as Secretary said, at the adult table. At many of your meals, I'm sure you're familiar, you have an adult table and you have a kids table, often cases in many families. And back at COP26 Food and Agriculture, we were at the kids table. We were the afterthought. And he shared with the audience that we're so excited going into COP28 and through AIM for Climate, raising the profile of how important agriculture and food systems are in the climate conversation and bringing those solutions to bear, that we're moving up to the adult table going into COP28. And so that has been a huge investment on the part of USDA and the US government. and we're excited about the future.
Thank you so much. And listening out right now from the perspective of the private sector, Katerina, can you tell us a bit of what is the approach of the company or your company in terms of food system innovation? And how do you keep the company inspired? How do you get the company aligned with the goals of food system innovation?
Thank you. So Katarina Stenholm from DSM-Firmenich, two sustainability leaders, innovation powerhouses came together in a merger this May to now form DSM-Firmenich. And we have set out to bring progress to life. The way we want to do it is by combining the essential, so what people need, the desirable, what people want, with the sustainable. So that's kind of how we think about the company, what we do. We feel we don't need a sustainability strategy or an innovation strategy. We have a company strategy that will bring innovations to the marketplace that help us solve the sustainability problems. Just to answer a question on the food system, so what we've really thought about, like we tend to split it in three. So the health of the planet, health of people, but we also look at healthy livelihoods for smallholder farmers that we heard about earlier today. And what we then try to do is really think about where do we have a license to win? Where do we have something unique to bring to the table? Because there are so many issues out there in the world. We could try to tackle them all and probably achieve very little. So for example, when it comes to health of the planet, we're really focusing on what can we do. We have a big animal nutrition business. How can we help make animal protein production more sustainable? We have an innovation called Bovaer, takes out between 30 up to 30% of the emissions from animal protein production. So huge impact. So again, kind of rather than doing many small things, focus on something that is big. The other thing we're focusing on there is then plant-based proteins, making them also combining with our taste, texture, knowledge to bring them to the market in a form that they are very acceptable to people. When it comes to health of people, we have a huge human nutrition business. So we're focusing on micronutrients. We have set out to reach 800 million people through micronutrients and through that bring progress to life. We're also looking at immunity, wanting to reach 500 million people, boost their immunity again with micronutrients. And then last but not least, we are set out to reach 500,000 farmers, 500,000 farmers, really help them reach an living income by being part of our supply chain. So I think it's really about us think about what is core to your business. So if your business is successful, then you're having these positive impacts that you want to have. So I think that is think about where can we lead, other spaces where we can co-lead together with other players, and then there are some spaces where we just follow because we can't do it all. And then perhaps the one thing I would like to call out is also partnerships. We can't do this alone, and so what we always think about, who can we partner up with? So for example, in the malnutrition space, we work very closely with UNICEF, with World Vision, with the World Food Programme, to really have the people who are out there dealing with these problems. We try to bring our expertise to the table. So for example, in rice fortification, have had really massive results through the partnership networks that then increases our scale and reach massively.
Excellent, Katerina. And this is a good segue to Tanya, who joined us from the World Economic Forum. So we're talking about partnerships and the value of collaboration, Tanya. So from your perspective, from the web perspective, how do you see the value? What do you see in the value of collaboration in food system innovation? What good experience do you have? And maybe what failures or what non-good experience you will have to share with all of us?
No, thanks so much. I think it's because it's the Thursday of UNGO week that I'm feeling a little bit relaxed enough to be provocative. So I hope that's okay.
That's good. That's good.
I think the sort of failure headline that Danush and the team have put out there is so important because it's also about what have we learned, right? And I think when it comes to the role of technology in food systems transformation, it's often thought about that, there is this sort of advanced tech solution, it's high cost and it's out there. And if we can somehow grab it, that will save the situation. And I think the failures of the past and the learnings from that kind of thinking is really speaking to what Paul was saying earlier around the uptake and adoption. Why is that not happening? because we have the technologies. I mean, we have the technologies right now in food and agriculture that can actually buy us time on climate change, but we're not investing in them. We're looking at the hard to abate sectors to create technologies we can't even imagine, to have alternative options to flying around the world and trucking and shipping and aluminum and steel. But if we change our practices on the farm, we can actually sequester carbon, we can lower our water footprint, we can have co-benefits that actually give farmers dignified livelihoods. And there is a role for technology in that uptake. But I think our failures and learnings have showed us that it's a little bit more than the tech solution itself and the financing that brings it.
Bravo to that.
Thanks, guys. I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, so, but maybe I'll say, and I have my team sitting in the audience who's actually doing this on the ground, so it's really them who should speak to this. But I would give the example, and we're working with DSM and also with Aim4C and Paul and the whole team around understanding this better, right? So in Colombia, we have the Food Innovation Hub. What do we mean by Food Innovation Hub? It's the ecosystem that enables that technology to be fit for purpose. So it's sedimented in the farmer and the producer community to say, what do they need? What are their actual problems and their pain points with technology? Based on that, let's innovate the way we are supporting them to make these transitions. So the example in Colombia, yes, it has AI, precision ag, it has Microsoft with their digital solutions, but the real innovation is that it was centered around the farmer. And so instead of procuring for one company's offtake, it's a series of companies looking at intercropping, which is not new as an innovation, but applied for a farmer-centric outcome. They're looking at now multiple crops as a basket or an innovation cluster. And then there's scale, then there's sort of adoption, and you're going on that journey. In the EU, we've had actually some unlikely bedfellows coming together around this, right? If I'm allowed to say that, this is Chatham House, right? So you have the Netherlands, you have EIT Food, they're pioneering institutional innovation to be able to work together around these solutions. So I guess my response to collaborations is that it's often not the gizmo so much as the way we will innovate how we're doing this. And I'm hoping that we can pair the power of what Jamie was describing, because that is mobilizing large-scale thinking, investment, and support and political will for technologies to be applied to those markets. But these innovation marketplaces are really important. So how do we kind of bridge and marry those in a way that's really helpful for the farmer?
Thank you so much. And I think that it's very interesting and very inspiring to see that beyond the technology, where the panelists have also shared the importance of putting farmers at the center and living income and the solutions coming from them as well. A question for all the three of you. This morning, we heard from the students from the university and also from Paul about different innovations and ideas from innovation. What examples do you have in your practical experience of best bet innovations that are being supported or that you think are coming up that you could support or think about that are worth pursuing? And what advice do you have for those who are entering this journey of best bet innovations? Maybe, Katarina, you want to start?
So perhaps I come back to the Bavaria example, who really thinks that one of the big problems with for example, meat and dairy production is the methane. And we really have doubled down on it. So there is more than 10 years of scientific research. There is more than 60 peer-reviewed papers really understanding the problem, and for a massive scale benefit that would really change the emission picture on a farm. But also in doing all of this, obviously we needed a lot of data to be able to prove. But then we also started to realize the value of that data, both for us, but also for the farmer in terms of driving or running their farm in a more sustainable way. So we also created now a kind of a knowledge-based, a database product out of this. So thinking in all of this, I would also, from the innovations we saw this morning, it would be really interesting to look at everybody who's looking at the nutrient efficiency on a farm. There are certain nutrients going in. We want them to be converted into protein. We want as little as possible in terms of emissions. It would be nice to bring them together And really think also, I was thinking about it this morning when we looked at the innovations. There are so many sustainability innovation accelerators. How could we bring everybody who's working on that same problem together? And could we somehow then create a mega project for a mega innovation rather than all of us doing our own thing? And would be happy to contribute to the share learnings that we have made in running our own innovation.
I mean, I think that's exactly the right approach. Maybe to completely counter my argument earlier, I would say two things I'm excited about, going back to Paul's, kind of very science and evidence-based proposal on what we need to be doing out there, and linking that to the technologies. One is on low emissions rice. I think we're there as a global community, understanding that it's not necessarily high tech, but actually practices that can help improve both the sort of food and water related, whether it's reducing climate emissions, whether it's improving water retention in the soil and the way you're sort of drying, wetting the kind of rice production. And so I think, again, back to not high tech, although I'm sure there's high tech to measure that, that would be helpful, but I think we're almost there on that. So that's a big bet I would take, low emissions rice. I think there's a huge potential in the near term, again, to take something like a hard to abate agri-commodity like rice and start to make progress on climate goals and nature and water goals. The second one, again, I'm in this food and water space right now, so I'm getting excited about the Nexus solutions, right? So we have this initiative at the forum called Uplink. It's sort of a crowdsourcing of innovators. So not just early stage, but more of the ready to scale innovators. And this has been a game changer for me personally, but also for the way we're convening these conversations. These innovators come out of, kind of world-class vetting processes, and they come into these conversations and they don't describe the challenges for 55 minutes. They talk about solutions and they flip the conversation. And so one innovator recently that we call an aquapreneur, because they're solving for water, was talking about a simple sort of technique that would reduce footprint from irrigation while actually rewarding the farmers for doing that through the supply chain financing of the off-taker. So a little bit of an incentive system that's actually addressing a problem while kind of starting to create not a complex water market, but just incentives for the farmer to change practices. So those are the, I think, kind of big bets. I would bet on innovators, and I would bet on rice. You can quote me.
We'll keep you. Jamie?
Oh, if I knew, I should probably go out and buy a lottery ticket tonight. And so, I think we need to look at the consumers and the farmers, because that's who will make the decision. Just as you all participated in the game earlier today, you're driving that demand. So we know consumers want safe, nutritious, and affordable food. That's the pull mechanism. So as consumers, if you're going into your grocery stores and you're looking for products that are from local farms or produced in a sustainable way, your purchase speaks volumes. You're going to pull that commodity through the system. You're going to talk through your purchases to food processors about the way you want your food produced, what you want access to. On the other end, it's the farmers, ranchers, fishers, and foresters who are producing the food, fiber, fuel that we need to sustain a global population, growing global population. They're running businesses. So it's important that our researchers and our scientists that are producing these innovations are out working hand in hand with the farmers, ranchers, fishers, and foresters to develop what they need, what's practical for implementation, what's economically viable, because they are putting food on the plates of their families, in their homes, in their communities. And so they have to be part of that conversation. So it's a very complex environment, and those innovations are going to be pushed out, adopted by farmers if it's economically viable, if it makes sense to maintain the natural resources year over year that they depend on to produce food for all of us. We all got up this morning and we're here today because we didn't have to go out in our backyard and harvest eggs from the chickens or milk the cows or go harvest some coffee beans. I know y'all had coffee this morning. We didn't have to do that, which used to be a huge time dependency of the average household throughout the world. And we depend on our producers to enable us to to invigorate the other sectors that we all are employed by. And so I think it is a combination of a push-pull. It's going to be the consumers and the farmers, and that's what's really going to drive which innovations that we saw presented today are successful.
Oh, thanks. So some three ideas that I'm taking away. The center approach on farmers themselves, living income, etc., which is going beyond technology. I think that's innovation doesn't necessarily have to be tied to technology then. The other one is the value of collaboration. And I take, Katharina, your note that there's a lot of acceleration and collaboration happens. But can we try to make an even more collaboration within the collaboration? And then the notion of the push and pull. The role of the consumers, us deciding what we want, how do you drive the conversation, and the conversation also coming from the farmers, what can they do, how can we adapt their innovations. So we have a little bit of time to have an engagement with the audience, and I would like to invite questions from all of you, if you have, and there's a microphone over there for the audience to make. If you can tell us your name and then the question briefly, and I'll ask you please to be brief and go into the question, so your intervention should end with a question mark.
My name is Michael Lynn. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm the producer of the Climate Boot Camp, and we just released our tracks on water and regenerative agriculture, working with the National Extension Climate Initiative. And in that process, got to talk to a lot of farmers. I grew up on the Tennessee River, and you can no longer swim in half of the Tennessee River. You cannot eat fish from any of the Tennessee River because of Dow, 3M, Thiokol, the major chemical companies releasing 3 pounds of poisons per man, woman, and child in the U.S. per year, unnecessarily. We do not need that much chemical, and we've shown that. You can look at Gabe Brown, who grows a bushel of wheat for $1.61 without the chemicals, versus $4.01 with the chemicals. So the question I have is, how do we get control of the money influence to enable the farmers to really be profitable in more natural, less costly ways?
So, Tanya, Katharina. Jamie, Tanya, Katharina, who would like to take the question?
I think actually one really interesting thing is been involved in many regenerative agricultural projects, and where very often it starts with there's a huge on cost to change these practices. But in so many instances, we see after 2-3 years, there seems to be a rebalancing of the ecosystem, the natural system at the farm. And all of a sudden, with much less input, growing in a much more natural way, you actually have a better outcome. So I think also if we start to think not about the cost of, like, see this as something that will cost us more, just think about there is a transition that we need to finance. There's a transition that we need to inspire. I do think there is a better way of farming, and we've seen it at scale.
Thanks. Any Amy,
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, it's such an important topic, right? And I think climate, I'm not gonna say something like there's a silver lining, but just to say it's driving so much R&D right now on this, right? There's so much trying to get figured out. And when I think about capital, and I'm learning about it, you know, as we go, in the sense that you have to segment that out to where in that transition, what kind of capital, who it's coming from. It can't all come from, you know, the burden can't be on the farmers. So then there's the sort of value chain that they work in. It can't be on that entire value chain either, because we can't put the end product burden on the consumer, to Jamie's point. So how do you actually enable some of the, for example, global climate financing that's going to all these hard to abate sectors, and under 4% of it goes to agri-food, when we've all been talking about how agri-food can be a huge productive contributor to climate. So I think it's also about what kind of capital, and I think what we're seeing more and more, especially when you bring things like water into the conversation, there's a risk management opportunity. There is, you know, opportunities to look at the wider co-benefits of that regenerative agriculture beyond just the carbon sink it creates, the livelihoods, the water ecosystems nearby that aren't thinking about that farmer transitioning, but actually they're future links to that decision. And so helping them get involved from a financing and technical expertise perspective. So I think the more we can distinguish and enable a sort of, I don't speak finance, so finance stack, whatever that means, but the sort of layering of all of these different contributors and really managing that risk together and then managing that capital in a different way. Hopefully that's what we're going to start to see more of.
Yeah, and I'll just add that to your point on the use of chemicals, we do need to maintain the tools and the toolkits for farmers, and the chemicals are being produced because there's a demand for those products. But on the same time, I can tell you that the average farmer, and I'm sure in your conversations, they don't want to use these products because every product that a farmer, rancher, fisher, forester uses on their property comes out of their bottom line. It costs money. Fertilizer, insecticides, herbicides, all of that costs money and it comes out of their bottom line. So if there is an alternative to not using those products or using less, they're going to take it. They're businessmen and women. This is basic economics. And so I think enabling that education, more extension, more investment in the research, development, demonstration, deployment pipeline is critical. To Tanya's point, if you look at the amount of money that has been placed into clean energy since the 80s, we now have electric vehicles, we have solar, we have wind. Where's the equivalent for food and ag? You saw some up on the screen, but the pipeline of investment, if someone can tell me what that delta is, we're looking for it. But those studies just aren't there to help decision and policymakers around the world. And we have a critical moment at COP28 coming up with food and agriculture statement being put forward at the leaders level, heads of state coming forward and saying, this is a priority. We need to do more. And investment and innovation is a critical component. Aim for Climate has helped raise that profile to now over $13 billion in just 2 years, increased investment in climate smart ag and food systems innovation. And so there's a lot, it's a complex situation, but I think we need to definitely invest more because farmers, our producers around the world want to increase their bottom line. They don't want to use as much on their farms. We have to help provide them through innovation, through extension and education, what those other opportunities are.
Excellent. We have another question. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful speaking. And my name's Gloria Pekani from Malawi, and I'm one of the farmers here, and I have 70,000 farmers. And the question to the ladies, I had the lady from Colombia, she talked about how to engage the farmers. I think it's both a comment and a question. How do we get to the farmer, the language that the farmer needs to know, because it's the farmer who needs to change what we are bringing all here. So we are talking, but we're not communicating to the farmer. I don't know what to do. You talk about regenerative, resilient, COP29, 30, 40. I don't know what all these things are. And and you're expecting the world to change. I'll give you an analogy. It's like having a wound, and an organization says, I'm preparing the gauze. The other one says, I'm having the spirit, I'll fix it. The other one says, oh, let me get the stitching, the needle is not ready. But at that point in time, the wound is septic. By the time you all get together, the person is amputated. So like Annabelle said, let's do and make the mistakes like what they say. Whatever is there, let's start working on it and communicate to us, the farmers, who need to change, speak to our language so that we can be able to do what we need to change. Thank you.
So thank you so much for the question. And we talked about the push and pull, the farmer role. We talked about farmer-centric approaches. But how do we respond to this particular question when the farmers themselves, they don't even understand the lingo that we're using, the jargon, and they don't feel engaged in the discussion. They feel more like a beneficiary, as they used to call it in the development world some years ago. And any words of wisdom or reflection about that?
I mean, I think it's a big problem. How do we reach the farmers? But I think we see more and more companies who are using farm produce actually going to the source. So we would talk about project at source. So we would look at agricultural produce that comes into our supply chain and then set up a project with the farmers. Because actually also the farmer knows what is their challenge. We might have some fantastic ideas and they tell me, well, that simply will not work for these and these reasons that I was totally unaware of. And what we have come to realize, it's also like we can't go and necessarily only talk regenerative agriculture. First of all, change the language, but then also really understand that whole farm economics. So then it might be the agricultural practices. How do we discuss what could work? It's the financing aspect. How do we help the farmer access the finance so that they could get over that hump in terms of transition? There could be also other services, market access, a big one. So if the farmer does all of this, if we are not there to facilitate the market access, it's obviously also not going to scale. And sometimes it's also very basic needs that we need to help that farming community with. It could be as simple as clean water. And these are complex projects. There are luckily fantastic organizations that we can work with, but I think our big learning is work with the farmer, because the farmer knows so much that what we can then perhaps help facilitate. But I think still here the big problem is scale. How do we scale this? But I am quite optimistic because I'm seeing more and more companies doing this, go back through their own value chain, go back to what farm produce am I using, and start to work on that very concretely.
Thank you. Tanya, Jamie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, so first of all, thank you for your comments and, representing 70,000 farmers. There's such an important role there in terms of bringing that, as you were saying, demand bottom-up understanding of what the actual challenges are and making sure that everyone is at the table to discuss those and co-design those solutions. I was just, the only reason I'm like even smally smirking is I think this language challenge is applicable to all of the parties. So I sit at the nexus of facilitating multi-stakeholder collaboration, and you would be surprised how much you have in common with banks who also don't want to hear about COP28 or food systems transformation or small, aggregated, fragmented things. So I think I don't want to minimize the importance of a communication lever and also co-design lever with farmer communities. Absolutely. I mean, that is part of what that fit for purpose innovation marketplace only works if that's happening. And I think we need, the sort of support, and maybe we need to give more support to the farmer organizations to not just be at the table, but then have the ability to both give the input and translate that outcome in a way that's at scale. And maybe there's a role for, technology to do that. But I think there's also a human to human. We all sort of in our own spaces learn from what we trust. So I always think about demo farms or demonstration farms, or learning from your neighbor is a sort of accepted principle in scaling in rural communities. But I think, that's applicable to the private sector too. You'd be surprised. In the food industry, they don't really measure themselves by bottom lines. I feel like they measure themselves by their competition. So like what's so-and-so doing and what's so-and-so doing? So I think there's a equal playing field that needs to be created here, and we all have to commit to doing that. And I absolutely agree that the farmers have to be absolutely in the center of that.
So maybe also thinking about what is the race to the top and not the race to the bottom, if we're all thinking what everybody else is doing.
Exactly.
Jamie, from your end?
I have to agree with Tanya that it's not something that's unique. Thank you for your comments again. We've heard through the consortium of Aim for Climate, a lot of organizations join. If your organization hasn't joined, here's my pitch, please join. But we've had a lot of organizations, private sector, multilateral banks, and so many others who are, what's this COP thing? And why is it important? It is so important. I can't repeat enough. To be involved in the process, your voice counts. You need to understand and participate as an organization, having those farmers organizations understand. We've had in the last 2 years so many briefings through Aim for Climate to help people understand what the COP process is. Organizations, what do you mean I needed to sign up a year ago? I want to go to Dubai in December. I had to sign up last August to be an observer. and just understanding the process that's been going on for a very long time. But this is reflective of how food and agriculture is coming into the conversation and raising the profile, and farmer voices have to be there right alongside. So I can't encourage enough to have those farmer organizations. And we know of quite a few that are coming to the table, being part of the conversation, learning about the process so that they can then inform their constituents. And that's what we're doing as a government as well, helping people to understand the process and to be a participant and to have their voice heard, which is critically important.
So we have time, I think, for 2 or 3 more questions, so 10 more minutes. So I would go with the gentleman over there, and then the lady, and final question if we have time. Please.
Thanks very much, and thanks to the panel for the insights so far. I wanted to connect what you were talking about with finance with this larger conversation we're having about innovation. And what I haven't heard is anybody talk about innovation in policy. And the innovations that we have heard about are exciting, but they also seem to fall kind of within, they don't encompass all of the kinds of innovations that I could imagine, I think many of us could imagine. And I'm curious, anybody who's interested in replying, what kind of innovations in either agricultural policy or related finance policy or transportation policy we could or should be thinking about to kind of expand the range of options and the kinds of benefits that we could deliver to climate, to the environment, and to farmers.
Perhaps starting with you, Jamie, from the government side.
There's so many policy adjustments that could take place and that are in the works to help create a framework and an environment that allows for more investment in research and innovation, more movement through the pipeline. We haven't touched on the regulatory component, which is also a critical element in the world to enable those innovations to quickly move through the pipeline, but to ensure that they're safe at the same time. And so there's a lot that can be done and a lot more that should be done. And food and agriculture is such a core component to this conversation. And I think we can look to other sectors like transportation and energy to consider some of the policies and different finance options that they've put in place, advanced commitments, and so many more that I'm sure the World Economic Forum and others in the private sector are looking at to help ensure that we have a robust environment.
Indeed, and on that note, what Katarina and Tanya, what do you think is the role of the private sector to shape those policy conversations and to be influential?
I think it's probably to simplify the conversation, try to be very clear on what we need to change, what is the outcome we are driving, and then just think about how can we create a policy environment that incentivizes exactly that to happen.
Tanya,
Are you asking me as the World Economic Forum or as me?
you can pick.
Okay. Well, no, I just want to. Well, let me answer directly. Like, what are we seeing? And then I might have a comment on that. So I think for example, Singapore kind of taking the parapet view on all proteins and starting to put regulatory conditions around that and testing that has given them a huge influx of capital on cultivated meat, on cellular meat, on all protein fermentation. And that has taken, a lot of countries by both surprise and they're interested. They want to invest in that when you're a country like the UAE or a country like Israel, where your arid climates are not going to be able to produce the kind of food self-sufficiency you can see in a Brazil or in a US. Those kinds of solutions are really attractive, and the capital that's pouring in to that and plant-based, I think, is significant. And we're looking at that from not a policy perspective, because actually we don't advocate for policy. So I would say the way I've really experienced policy in our space at the forum is more of an unlock, right? So if everyone's willing to roll up your sleeves and go improve models, and then there's a policy inhibiting that, and that needs to be adjusted or changed or kept and reinforced, that's an unlock, and I think that's where it comes in. My personal view, I think it's a huge elephant in the room, right? I think if we don't address the massive policy reform that's needed on this, alongside the capital inflows and alongside the innovation and the practices and the voice and communication back to the farmers, how are we really going to reach scale? I mean, I think we need that help, and we need to support each other to get there. So I think it's absolutely a huge element.
Just one final thing. I think you can also look at policy as you can make the policy decision to where you invest your money. That in and of itself, at a leader's level and at a minister's level in government, you can make that decision. I'm going to make it a policy that I'm going to prioritize investing in agriculture research. That's a very complicated decision. It seems simple to all of us because we're all sitting here, we're all preaching to the choir, if you will, right? We're all here because we believe in food and agriculture. And so, but at the same time, that's a very complex environment in budget decisions where your investments are going to go when you have, especially when you have a limited pot of money. And so to have more advocates in the space saying, yes, agriculture research is important, you need to invest. And so that could be a policy position that others around, and again, all of your voices can contribute to that as well.
Thank you. So we have 3 more questions and we only have 5 minutes. So this is a game of game theory. So can you guys state your question briefly, just without intros? And then we'll allow each of you to pick one of the questions to answer it. Again, it requires that the 3 of you play the games. So, because otherwise you will sacrifice on the other. So go.
Okay, I'll be as brief as possible. My question is about access. As we're building out and thinking about how we scale, we want to make sure that we're not repeating the same mistakes of leaving important folks out at the table. So how do we make sure that young people who do not have access to capital, like less than 0.001% of investment is in young entrepreneurs, women, other groups that have not traditionally had access to startup funds like this, make sure that they're included?
Perfect. So access, go for it.
So in preparation for COP, now that we're at the adult table, what do we do? What are the hopes? There a declaration that is in the works. Who are the players? Who are the people that we need to convince? What are we hoping to achieve that's feasible and that would have a significant impact?
So access, persuasion, and COP, and what do you need to do? And please.
I know that there are some really tried and true methods when it comes to biosecurity. There's a huge issue of avian influenza that's existed over the past few years. Are there any innovations in biosecurity that you guys are excited about?
Perfect. So access, persuasion to COP and similar forums, and biosecurity. So who wants to pick one?
Can I take COP?
Please.
I think we should ask ourselves, why were we sitting at the kids' table? Let's make it bluntly clear that long time ago, we should have been at the adult table for people just to understand the link between food and ag and climate change in a very holistic way. Let's try to get that message out as simple as we can, as powerful as we can, so that everybody thinks, oh my God, why did we keep them at the kids' table?
Perfect. So COP, access or biosecurity.
I can do the access one. I feel like I heard this stat on Sunday at the beginning of this amazing long week that the sort of 29 years old and under and 55-year-olds and over are the 2 cohorts that are prone to take the greatest risks, right? So if we're talking about engaging the youth and the people that have been left behind, I think we need to reorganize, maybe give sabbaticals to those of us who are not, by the way, limited in our capacity. We're just so locked in to the current infrastructure that taking risk is not only not incentivized, but not necessarily something we're able to do. And so I think it's not just about seeing the fact that they don't have capital from those communities. I think they bring so much more quality into the outcomes that we want to design, that there is a huge case for that access to be more than just tokenism and bringing in a couple of representatives. Let's put them to work to think about this and change the way we're addressing it.
Jamie, you have the tough question, I guess.
No, I'm going to weave all 3.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I'm going to say that the youth need to come to COP because there is a youth advocate and it's critical to have that youth voice. There's this thing called the Green Zone, which is open to the public. If you're not familiar, go seek out the money. If you're a member of the youth, go to your university offices, look for those grants, look for those experiential grants, come to COP and experience it so you can understand how it works and weave it into your profession as you go through life. And then Also, we have the companies who are working in the biosecurity realm and also working on cooperation. We need to have more cooperation to help pull the opportunities that we're seeing coming out of government-funded work. One good example is the USDA has produced African swine fever vaccine candidates, but we invest in that high-risk research, and we need somebody to take it and pull it to scale. And so there are emerging opportunities even in the biosecurity world if you're working in that world, and we need to connect all these pieces. And guess what? You might be a company that's a startup who can take those candidates or other solutions to scale, but you need a funder. You know where you can find that funder? Probably at COP28. And so again, networking, showing up and getting both youth, the funders, those that can scale those innovations together are the opportunity of the future.
Thank you so much to the members of the panel. Great insights. Before we go, because I know I have time over, in one word, what is the key takeaway from this conversation? One word only. So let's start with Tanya.
Hope.
Great.
Collaborate.
Future.
Paul?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to the panel. Thank you so much, Jamie.